Thank you. Whoa. Is it just me or does these microphones take your voice down an octave or two? Well, I feel like every time I talk, there's going to be some like Barry White instrumental going on in the background. This session title is called Behind the Brand, Championing Digital Environments and Building Brands for Today's Consumers. And as mentioned, this is the last session in what is another successful Brand Innovators conference. So our thanks to our friends at Brand Innovators and certainly to our friends at Nestle for hosting us. My name is Nick Cheetany. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales for AdTheorent. We are a DSP focused on driving real-world outcomes from machine learning, and we've assembled an amazing panel here. And the first thing I'm going to do is ask each one of them, from furthest to closest, to introduce yourselves, your titles, and what that means for Nestle.
I am Khosi Roy Matthias, and I lead our CCOE team, which is the communication COE, and I am responsible for helping to shepherd your creative journey and your brand strategy journey from a communication standpoint, from inception of the brand all the way to creation of the creative.
I'm Kim Holowiak. I am on the DiGiorno brand marketing team, leading the communications efforts. Everything that you see or hear that involves DiGiorno probably has us behind it. And I work very closely with Khosi. We developed our new campaign for this year, media planning, work with the media COE and a lot of different groups. And thank you for having us.
And I'm Josh Givens, and I like to say I have actually the coolest job in Nestle. I get to market and sell baking ingredients and cookies for a living. Which is really cool when you think about it at face value. But when you look at it below that, baking is a really emotionally triggered occasion. And, it's really cool opportunity for us to connect with our consumers on a very unique way. And really harnessing our digital ecosystem to help make baking, easier, quicker, more enjoyable, and ultimately, hopefully inspiring more occasions on a daily basis. So I'm really excited to be here, and thank you again for the opportunity.
And going into the holiday season, I mean, this is absolutely...
This is our Super Bowl.
Heck yeah, absolutely.
Buckle up.
Yep. All right, well, let's open it up with talking about something that, it might be redundant, but I think it's necessary that we hear as much perspective as possible on this, because I don't know if any one of us in our lifetimes will go through what we have been through in the last couple of years with the pandemic. We want to talk about the shift in consumer behavior, and I actually want Khosi to give her input on this. What kind of shifts in consumer behaviors have you seen as a result of the pandemic, and how has this impacted your approach to media and advertising?
So if I were to think about consumer behavior coming out of the pandemic, it's not to turn into a concern, but my observation isn't so much the behaviors that changed coming in and out of the pandemic, right? Because some of it was short-lived, right? The hoarding of products and, people are still shopping on digital or platforms, but some of that has declined. What I think we should be most acutely aware of is the shift in consumer values that rippled from the coming out of the pandemic, and that's what I think that we should proactively think to respond to, right? And there are two values that I personally observed. The first is the erosion of trust, right? And so when I think about the climate coming out of the pandemic, there's all this question around transparency, right? There's political transparency and trust. There was, vaccines and trust, and there's all this culture of whether something's accurate or not. And I think that eroded at consumers' trust in big business and industry, which impacts us, right, in the way that they believe our promises. And that I actually think we are prepared for, because our response to that is we've always had really functional advertising, right? We varied on how emotional and functional it is, but coming out of the pandemic, I think we did a really good job preparing our comms from a comms perspective, making sure everything was very functionally driven in the way we talked about it. So I think we're good, but I do think that's a shift in consumer values. The other was the erosion of trust came the questioning of purpose, right? And then the political climate went into a social comment, which we all saw, which was, what is the brand doing for the world, right? And that I actually think we probably weren't as prepared for, and it became this era of the public, right? And I think something like 60% of consumers expected us to do good with also being good. So the good news is Nestle's probably one of the most purpose-driven companies you work for. Everyone has had to sit with me in this room and do your purpose, multiple times, and sometimes it felt like torture. But the good thing is we're prepared from that perspective, but we've never had the opportunity to act on it. So we're prepared in the sense that we've got the how, we just haven't really had the opportunity to do it. But I have seen this era of the public start to evolve and being prepared for it. We've only got the foundation there, but we need to start showcasing to the world what we're actually doing for them, because that's become a true, I think, value for consumers.
Very, very well said. And I'll just add from like our perspective in baking, those that have been around in Nestle for a while know that the baking category was going through some pretty tough times going into the pandemic. We were facing years and years of, category relevancy decline. People weren't going down the aisle, and it was something that your grandmother did or your mother did, but it wasn't something that you did specifically. And what happened is that when the pandemic hit, right, everybody got locked down, and what did they do? We had people that barely ever touched a toaster were turning on their oven to try to bake cookies. And then with that became the rise in this trend of searching online for inspiration, searching online for know-how to try to figure out how to do that. And then what we also saw was this convergence around the rise of this behavior of searching online and education, and then the rise of e-commerce, of click and collect and concierge services. And with that convergence, there was this opportunity to really take a look at the broad and the holistic consumer journey, the consumer path to purchase, and identify exactly where those pain points were and make sure that we're being extremely diligent about offering solutions along those barriers on that path to purchase. And so, and along with that rise in e-commerce and the convergence of those two behaviors, allowed us an opportunity to look at how we're spending our media dollars and trying to find ways that we can tie our media dollars closer to that point of purchase, which is the holy grail of marketing, to be able to tie media spend to an actual shopping cart. And we're not there yet as an organization or an industry, but that's one big shift that we saw within baking that I think will only continue to increase and will open up additional opportunities for us moving into the future as well.
And I think also it's not just like, I know it really impacted baking in that way, but to understand the behaviors that you learn from the consumer and being able to keep those, the patterns that we've learned. So some people experienced the pandemic in one way, some people experienced it in another way. Some people were very isolated. Some people had family coming out of their ears. And so understanding how consumers related, how they experienced their baking, experienced whatever they were doing during that time, and understanding those patterns and taking them into what we do now. So understanding, customization, that really came out of it. How do we target these people? How do we make sure that we're connecting with them in a way that's going to actually resonate, and spend the dollars wisely and not just, go broadly, but understand that, they were baking. And how do we get them to remind themselves like, hey, I liked this and I can do it this way, and engage with my family again, taking that customization and personalization and applying it now.
Amazing points, and I kind of want to stay on that for just a little bit longer, because coming out of the pandemic, and I promise these questions are going to be a lot more optimistic moving forward, but there is talk of a looming recession, and when we approach a time like this, you both kind of talked about performance being top of mind. It's crucial to digital advertising and business outcomes. How are you shifting your strategies in light of what we feel might be on the horizon economically?
I mean, I think that's where we started with the customization. You have to really understand, like, you can't boil the ocean. You have to find the specific people that you want to target, understand who your consumer is, and, you know, how they tick, and, you know, communicate to them in a way that's actually going to matter. You can't be spending money, you know, with the recession, you know, that's going to be coming. We can't just be spending money and going broad anymore. You have to understand who the consumer is, why they're going to react in a way they will, and also understand what their behaviors are. Because, I mean, obviously we know the consumer is at the middle of everything, but, you know, we can't just look at ROAS. We can't just look at like all these normal metrics without understanding, you know, how does this consumer react to it? What kind of tactics can we use with them? How do we A/B test it? How do we make sure that they're reacting to it? And, you know, go a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit more regional, maybe just understanding which target audiences actually, you know, care about it, and amplify that way instead of going so big, so that you're spending your money a little bit more wisely.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there, and I'm not just saying this because my boss is in the room, but I do think data-driven marketing analytics is going to be really huge going into this recession. And I think it's because, you know, when there's a recession, like Kim said, there's no flex financially, right? And there's such an emphasis on ROI and making sure that our data is rich and smart and not dense, right? So not data for data's sake, but data that is actually really valuable and helps you make efficient and quick decisions about your business is going to be really important. So making sure that we have those tools internally to empower us to do that better is going to be critical for the recession.
Well, and I'll take a slightly different approach to the answer. Recession or not, we know that inflation is an issue, right? I feel it. I feel it at home. I know our consumers are feeling it today, right? So recession or not, we don't know if that's going to happen. It looks like it might, but we don't know that for certain. And so what we need to do as brand marketers is start thinking about different ways that we can add value to the consumer or bring value to the consumer beyond just the product or the price, right? And I go back to my role in managing our digital ecosystem. You know, it's using our digital ecosystem, right? Breaking down barriers, helping consumers and shepherding them along on that path to purchase so that we can help make the act of baking or whatever they're engaging in, make it more enjoyable, make it more fun, something that they can take a step back from their day-to-day lives and the pressures of inflation or near recessions, and really add value to the consumer, again, beyond just product and price. And I think that that's going to be a critical challenge for us as brand marketers and as an organization to think through holistically, and just because we owe it to the consumers, and we can't just keep, you know, taking the price up on them and expect them to hang around if we're not adding any additional value beyond that.
Absolutely. And staying on that point, how Josh, I would love to get your perspective on this. How are you then measuring success when it comes to your programmatic campaigns, looking at conversions, clicks, ROAS, impressions, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, I had a tough time kind of thinking through this question a little bit because I don't want to pinpoint, you know, one specific indicator to measure success, right? We're always going to be paying attention to the traditional metrics, right? What's the impression rate? What's your CPM rate? You know, we want to be reaching and talking to the most consumers we can that are receptive and open to our message, but we want to do it in a efficient way. Absolutely, that's, you know, the backbone of marketing. But when I go back to the ability to start to tie some of our media spend lower to lower funnel to closer to that point of purchase, we're going to want to look at some non-traditional metrics in order to really get a gauge for how we're performing in the market, whether that's add to cart rate, you know, abandoned cart rate, I don't know, or bounce rate, whatever it might be. And as we continue to explore these different tactics and lower funnel activities, we're going to need to be open, and we're also going to need to make sure that we're looking at our campaigns on a holistic measure and not just one specific KPI that says this is a successful campaign. We need to ensure that our campaign objective is met on a holistic front and not just one specific ROAS number, which for those that were in the room, apparently we have now a $6 benchmark ROAS. So that's a little concerning for us moving forward. It's an inside joke earlier today. Sorry, keep you out of the loop, but
It's quite all right.
I'm just kidding.
No, I think also it depends on where you're advertising.
Yeah.
Because obviously, the metrics are going to change, but I would just say go where they're talking about you already. I remember last year we were looking at TikTok and we weren't quite ready to go to TikTok. And I remember doing this analysis beforehand that there were 12 billion impressions on TikTok. And I was like, we need to be there. They're already talking about pizza. People are going to talk about it without us. And now there's 40 billion impressions, or 40 billion for hashtags. And, I was like, we need to be there. We need to be on TikTok. This is where people are actually talking about us. We don't need, something outrageous. We need to be able to make a mark there. And we don't have a $6 ROAS. We have 49, but still, it was very close. And, it did very well for us. So I would just say, if there's a place that's working for you, and, it may not be traditional, it may not be a place where it's programmatic or it's an area that's everyone else is going towards, but so far, none of the other pizza competitors in frozen are on it yet. And we were able to just, one quarter at a time, get some incremental sales there.
That's amazing. And if we could just stay on that thought for just a second, I want to talk about, you mentioned measuring success holistically. Curious on how TikTok was able to influence other parts of your advertising strategies. So looking at it from an omni-channel perspective, was there the ability to influence how one tactic informed another, following the consumer journey throughout the funnel, and just give us your overall thoughts and feedback on taking the omni-channel approach in that regard?
Yeah, I don't think of it like an upward funnel anymore. It's all the same. It's the full funnel at this point, and everything is just so infiltrated. We talk a lot about the spaghetti bowl, and I know that Mel Cash yesterday talked about it a little bit, but it is now this point where everyone is all in the same spaghetti bowl, and you really need to make sure that everyone is, talking about the same message in the consumer's eyes. They don't know who's omni and who's shopper and who's brand marketing and who's communications. It is DiGiorno Pizza, it's Toll House, it's whoever it is, and that's all they can see. So it's really important to make sure that you have the same message. I think, if they see it on TikTok, it should be similar to what they see when they're adding something from Smart Commerce on Instagram, or, it should always have the same message to them. That's the first part. And the second part, when you try to select which area along the path to purchase, I would just say, again, it's understanding your consumers where they already are, and finding those trends to see what they're doing, what the competitors are doing, and is there a place that you can start to activate on to make it go even further.
Yeah, just to add to that, a brilliant response, by the way. I loved it. When we think omni-channel, right, it should no longer, to Kim's point, it should no longer be omni-channel. It's what is our holistic media plan? And that holistic media plan should include omni, because for the consumer, if they go from Walmart.com to Google, back to Instagram, back to Walmart.com, for them, that's one experience. And so we can't be showing up differently from one touch point to the next. And we need to ensure that, to Kim's point, each touch point is serving a purpose for the consumer. And we're aiding the consumer in that entire path to purchase, from beginning all the way to checkout at the grocery lane. And we need to be showing up and having a consistent message across the board.
And give me a Friday evening with DiGiorno, Nestle, Toll House, and a good 80s movie, and I think we've got the perfect night in. You mentioned DiGiorno and Toll House in the same sentence, and that's immediately what I thought of. All right, so I want to make sure that we have enough time at the end for Q&A from the audience, but wanted to at least float one last question to all three of you. And Khosi, we could start with you, but plenty of unknowns when we think about the future and planning for next year. What are some of the biggest opportunities marketers can bank on going into 2023 and beyond?
I stand on purpose and marketing analytics. You've got those two things. I think that going into the recession, you can probably expect people to get really passionate about what brands are doing and the why behind it. And I think if you have the right set of efficient data to help you, empower you to make better decisions faster, you can be prepared.
Love it.
I would say just being breakthrough. People's attention spans are tiny. And, everyone's going to move on to the next thing immediately. So just remaining relevant, ensuring that what you're doing is culturally relevant, and that when someone thinks about your brand, that they know why they should purchase it over whatever the competitor is.
Absolutely.
I'm going to, again, kind of go maybe a little off script here. I think the one thing we can bank on going into next year is there's going to be unforeseen challenges, but with those challenges, there's going to be opportunities. And a quick little story, going into the pandemic, I was heading out to a snowboard trip. And I left, packed my bags, closed the laptop for the day, and it's like, all right, I'll come back in a week. And again, baking has been going through a rough time. That week was the week that the world shut down. And I came home from that trip, and I'm like, holy shit, we have an opportunity for meaningful growth. This is it. This is an opportunity for us to go capture. And so that's what I just want to leave you guys with, is like, we might have unforeseen challenges going into next year, but those challenges are going to present opportunities. And as long as we stay agile and innovative in our approach, in our marketing, and how we come to work every day, the opportunities are going to present themselves for us to capitalize on it. So just bank on unforeseen challenges and be ready to take and seize that opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, all three of you, for all that insightful feedback. And I want to open it up to the audience for the last 5 minutes to see if anyone has questions for our three panelists.
I'll hold it down here. Kim, you just mentioned this as far as like looking ahead, being breakthrough, right? So when we look ahead to 2023, what are some of the breakthrough moments that you're really excited about, or breakthrough opportunities as you look to the future?
Yeah, for us in particular, again, it's TikTok. We've started to stake a claim there. We were the first to do paid advertising. We had a music campaign that we started earlier this year, and for us, Pizza Talk is one of the highest talked about. It's the third highest, so there's a huge runway there. TikTok, the music sort of comedy space there, that and sports. Those are the two most important things that I look forward to for next year. Just making sure that DiGiorno in particular is culturally relevant to our consumers. Yeah.
If others want to answer.
I mean, for me, when I think about breakthrough, one, just a level set, I don't have near the budget that Kim has. So I got to be a little bit more scrappy with how we achieve our objectives. I talked a little bit about the path to purchase earlier, and we spent a lot of time really dissecting that. And so for us, breakthrough is making sure that when our consumer is on that path to purchase, right? And we know there's specific barriers and specific key milestones along that path to purchase. Whenever they're running into those barriers, we need to make sure we're showing up and offering them a solution to help move them further down that path to purchase. And I think that if we can do that on a consistent basis, that in and of itself is going to be breakthrough for our consumers. And I think we can do that in a very scrappy, well thought out way that will move the needle for us.
That's great. Next question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll be really quick. What's really interesting is all three of you have interesting and different perspectives, right? Because I think, Josh, some of your perspective, a lot of it is based on your budgets, right? So you're thinking path to purchase and how do you kind of get there efficiently. Kim, you've got a little bit more of experimental and you have the ability to try things such as TikTok. And Khosi, your first statement was an erosion of trust. And I think that's so interesting because sometimes not all of those things sort of, I guess, mesh together. How do you all sort of collaborate? Probably, I guess, more so Khosi in terms of looking at all these different brands, kind of push the messaging and the importance of the trust and credibility across when you're trying to execute and deliver against your business goals?
Well, I think historically the way that we push the trust and credibility has been through the functional messaging. I think as I look to impact and breakthrough in the future, it's going to be a little bit more of the purpose that I talked, and also our entrance into cultural with more cultural relevance, so we feel like we're part of the community and that we belong in it, right? So I think a big play, I know DiGiorno is looking to it, and Toll House has actually finished it, is just what does our cultural footprint look like so that communities feel like we are relevant, that we are aware, that we're sort of woke, right? And I think that's probably where you can bridge the gap with the trust, in addition to the functionality and the RTVs of the business.
And one thing I just want to chime in, I know we've talked a little bit about budget. Budget isn't everything. Like, it's celebrated and it's great when you have it, but there's scrappy ways to do things without budget. So just like be a little creative. We just had a campaign recently where we didn't have that much money and it was very successful. So just like, yes, it's great to have money, but if you don't, like, there's other things you can be doing as well. You can still have growth.
Sorry, Kim. I didn't mean to hit a nerve. Sorry.
Kim wants everyone to know she can function broke too.
can
Like, I know
function
how to be broke. Just because I'm rich now, I started broke. I know how to do it.
Just for Kim, TikTok, you mentioned, how are you, this is like real talk, how do you keep up with the content? Because I'm trying the same, and we broke into it this year, and I just can't keep up with the manufacturing of the content. How are you doing it?
It's a very good question because it's a lot of content. We are getting into organic next year. We've only done paid so far. Creator content has been the best for us. It's been the most authentic, and I think just finding the ways that work best for your audience. So we knew before TikTok that this like music comedy type of space with one of the creators, Trey Kennedy, really worked for us. And this like music theme worked, and obviously TikTok came from Musical.ly before, and so it's all like based on music. We just kind of like activated on that trend. So we've been largely focusing on creators. When it comes to next year, we're really going to be focused on creators, and just that mix between like not straight advertising, be a little bit more authentic, and try to just find the drive times that work for you. So like if you can't be on all the time, repurposing content from before that's still, you know, better performing will work as well.
Any other questions? I'll beat you there, Justin.
Hi, I'm from marketing analytics. And so the question is, and there's a lot of media analytics people in the room as well, is there a risk that the metrics we feed you lead you to short-term objectives or short-term optimizations at the expense of long-term? So for example, a focus on ROAS, right? This campaign has to drive as much return as possible in the short term, and that may steer you from maybe a longer-term objective. Creative A has a $5 ROAS, Josh, because it's cranking on your older generation, which is your core group. The creative B has a $3 ROAS, but it pulled in the millennial baker, and it set up a baker that will be around for, you know, many, many years. What do you think on how do you balance that?
I'm going to go back to my, my response to how we measure performance and success. We can't look at one specific metric to determine success. You need to understand what your campaign objective was, and then look at the metrics holistically speaking. So if my campaign metric or my campaign objective was to target the old bakers, the boomers and whatnot, and you tell me that asset performed better, well, my campaign objective better translate to business objectives as well. So as long as you're crystal clear on what your overall campaign objectives are, then I don't think that there's a fear of, a metric pointing you in a short-term view, as long as you're clear on that. But again, that's the importance of looking at your campaign objectives, not just in a silo of a ROAS or just impressions. It needs to be you're driving the appropriate amount of impressions with the appropriate people, and you're delivering things in an efficient way, ultimately, hopefully leading to conversion. And I think that's how you avoid going and evaluating campaigns and creative with blinders on, if you would.
Other questions? Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All the way from the back.
So, Josh, that's a great answer, and actually, it's sparked something Steve and I were actually talking about, which is you have to define what you're measuring before you actually go do something. But implied in that is we're actually defining well what we want to measure. And the question is more for you guys as you think about like how we define our KPIs. We tend to throw stuff out there very broad. It's like, I want to drive impressions with men 18 to 35. And then we complain when the measurements come back. It's like, oh, this doesn't tell me anything, right? How have you guys fought that in your roles? And is there something inherently in the system that we need to challenge to be more purposeful as we go into tactics that we're experimenting?
So I'll answer Daniel's question, and then I think I answered their question. I do think that we chase KPIs that show results in the short term. And I think that often we see that it erodes at brand equity in the long term. And there are certain goals that have long-term benefits that you have to have the patience to fail through and watch maybe your ROAS or your ROI or your KPIs fail in order to get to the long-term success, but we have to have patience through that. And from where I sit, where we work on brand equity, tracking brand equity, it changes. It takes a long time to see the benefit there, and it takes a lot of investment, and it takes a lot of money, right? But you have to have that long-term goal that you're willing to sit and be patient through. But I do think that sometimes we measure success in the short term. And when you talk about aligning on goals and KPIs, we would have to align to going on the journey and being patient through it. So I do think that the answer to Daniel's question is yes.
And
Any
I would
ads?
say the answer to the other question is also patience, because like, yes, you are going to have a targeted audience, but the whole point is like to test and learn and understand, like if you're going to be A/B testing. We do this thing that Carolyn developed called creative line targeting, where you like test back and forth, two different types of creative. And, we know that we're only going after two different areas, but we use that learning to be able to go to the next campaign. So, I mean, it's like a short-term discomfort for a long-term understanding.
Great. Any other questions? All right. Thank you all very much.